Good morning, everybody. I'm Constance Hunter, and it's my pleasure to welcome you back to day 2 of NABE's 37th Annual Policy Conference. Before introducing our speaker, I'm going to give you an update on where we are with the NABE Foundation donations. So we are at 20% of our $10,000 goal. And it probably would be helpful for everyone to know that we have 37 attendees at this conference that received scholarships. And I say this because your donations are so important to the success of our scholarship program and all of the work that the NABE Foundation does. And we would be exceptionally grateful for any donation. So if you can give $10, we're grateful. If you can give $100, we're grateful. If you can give larger amounts, we're grateful. So please go to nabe.com and you can click through to donate to the NABE Foundation. Thank you so much. All right, well, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker. We are very fortunate to have with us this morning the incoming Deputy National Economic Council Director, Daleep Singh. Daleep will report to both National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and NEC Director Brian Deese. Most recently, Mr. Singh was the head of the markets group at the New York Federal Reserve. John Williams recently said that over the past year, Daleep has played a critical role in the emergency facilities the Fed launched in response to COVID-19. I'm thrilled that he will continue to leverage his knowledge and expertise in support of economic policy at this important time. Mr. Singh is a former adjunct senior fellow at the Center for New American Security and the Atlantic Council. He was also an adjunct professor of geoeconomics at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. Mr. Singh holds a bachelor's degree from Duke University in economics and public policy. He also holds a Master of Business Administration and a Master of Public Administration from Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Harvard University with a focus on international economics. It is my pleasure to turn the podium, virtual though it may be, over to Daleep.
Good morning. I'd like to first offer a big thanks to Constance Hunter, Tom Beers, and the chairs of this year's annual Economic Policy Conference. The National Association for Business Economics is a remarkable organization, and I'm honored to kick off what is sure to be an excellent day ahead. But let me start by looking back. I'm sure all of us can remember exactly where we were a little over a year ago when the pandemic was declared and life as we knew it came to a screeching halt. You mentioned, Constance, I was but a few weeks into a new job at the New York Fed, leading a team that served as the eyes and ears of senior policymakers into financial markets. What I saw walking the empty streets of Manhattan was mirrored on my Bloomberg screens: the tragic consequences of a public health crisis morphing into an economic emergency, leaving millions of Americans facing unimaginable distress for months to come. Today, we're unmistakably on the road to recovery, but the pandemic is far from behind us. Almost 9.5 million Americans have lost their jobs since last February, almost 1 million more jobs lost than at the worst point of the Great Recession. The Black unemployment rate is still almost 10%. Workers in the lowest wage quartile face unemployment rates well above 20%. More than 2 million women have left the labor force, many in the wake of school closures and challenges with childcare. State and local government employment has dropped sharply, down 1.4 million jobs from last February, of which 1 million are in education. More than 15% of renters in America are behind on rental payments. Nearly 30 million adults and as many as 12 million children are struggling with food insecurity. Indeed, the pain has been concentrated on the most vulnerable: communities of color, lower wage service employees, those with less education, small business owners, elementary students without broadband, single mothers, and families that were already on the financial edge before the pandemic. COVID-19 didn't invent these disparities, but it deepened the divide and shined a light on long-standing inequities that continue to hold us back as a country through economic insecurity, and the loss of dignity, social displacement, and a pernicious sense that the system is rigged. And to be clear, these structural inequities are not just a matter of equity and fairness. They also represent a limitation on our country's capacity to produce, to compete, to innovate, and to lead by example in the global economy. President Biden came into office committed to addressing these interlocking crises and the disparities they've deepened. And 12 days ago, the president took a remarkable step to doing just that. He signed into law the American Rescue Plan, one of the most consequential pieces of legislation in American history. In doing so, he secured the resources to get enough vaccine supply for every single American adult by the end of May, to expand the number of nationwide testing and vaccination centers, and to help us quickly and equitably turn vaccines into vaccinations. Not only will the American Rescue Plan change the course of this pandemic by helping to stop the spread of COVID-19 and safely reopen schools, but it will also lay the groundwork for a vigorous and inclusive economic recovery. The American Rescue Plan delivers immediate relief to working families bearing the brunt of this crisis, particularly those with children. It provides critical support to struggling local, tribal, and territorial governments, and it addresses the stark intergenerational inequities that have worsened in the wake of COVID-19. Though I imagine everyone in the virtual room is familiar with the package, let me remind you all of its key components. The package enables an historic public health mobilization to defeat COVID-19, including $20 billion for vaccines, $50 billion for testing, and almost $8 billion in community health centers to address health disparities. It gets $1,400 checks to around 85% of American households. It lifts 11 million people out of poverty and cuts child poverty in half. It expands the child tax credit for 66 million kids. It expands the earned income tax credit for 17 million workers. It reduces healthcare premiums for millions and leads to at least 1.3 million in additional coverage. It makes the most significant investment in childcare since World War II. And it creates a small business opportunity fund to provide growth capital to Main Street small businesses in disadvantaged areas. Now that the legislation has been passed, the time has come to deliver much needed relief. The president and our team are laser focused on putting into place implementation plans to ensure that the people and communities who need support the most are receiving it as quickly as possible, including getting out $1,400 relief payments and distributing additional resources to speed up vaccinations. President Biden knows how to deliver on this because he's done it before. As the implementation lead on the Recovery Act in 2009, the president successfully got support out the door to keep struggling families and communities afloat while keeping waste, fraud, and abuse down to 0.2%. That's the approach he's going to take in putting the rescue plan into action, protecting taxpayer dollars and getting money to those who need it when they need it. From an economic perspective, the American Recovery Plan is designed as a bridge for American households and businesses to get beyond the pandemic shock, while avoiding the scars of an incomplete and uneven recovery. Several independent analyses of the plan have made this clear. For example, according to Moody's, the rescue package will allow us to reach full employment 12 months sooner than we would have otherwise, a difference of 4 million jobs in 2021 alone. And importantly, we know from recent history that lower income workers and those that have been traditionally less attached to the workforce are the cohorts that benefit the most in terms of job creation and wage growth when the economy is at full employment. To put this into context, according to most private forecasters, we're now on track to reach full employment at some point next year, which compares to an almost 10-year wait to return to pre-crisis employment levels after the Great Recession. We've also learned the hard way that large and persistent spikes of unemployment are among the largest drivers of inequality. The lowest paid workers are laid off first, and they're often the last to get hired back. In terms of aggregate output, economists from the Brookings Institution project that with the enactment of the president's plan, domestic GDP would reach the Congressional Budget Office's pre-pandemic projection at the end of 2021, and cumulative real GDP between 2020 and 2023 would end up close to its pre-pandemic projection. Getting the economy back on track and quickly matters in very real terms to preserve the social fabric of our communities and to preserve the productive capacity of the economy. This is exactly why President Biden sized the American Rescue Plan to meet the immediate public health and economic needs the country is facing. The resources that the bill provides to combat COVID-19 and open our schools are not about filling the output gap, but rather about providing large and broad-based social insurance to families and businesses. He recognized that taking aggressive and upfront action would limit the long-term separation of employees from the workforce, avoid needless bankruptcies, keep our supply chains intact, and restore confidence in our ability to recover, especially for those most at risk of being left behind. The design of the fiscal support is also a reflection of the fact that the costs of aggressive action today are especially low, with real interest rates and real debt service payments as a share of GDP near their historic trough. Of course, at some point, real interest rates may return to positive territory, but with wise investments in human and physical capital that will generate high returns to society for years to come, we can be more confident that any future increase in real interest rates is motivated by good news for economic growth rather than an increase in perceived fiscal risk. In this spirit, the American Rescue Plan marks the first step of an aggressive two-step strategy to rescue and then recover. Rescue refers to pulling the country out of the depths of four interlocking crises that have tested the country: an historic global pandemic, an economy battered by recession and inequality, the generational crisis of climate change, and a centuries in the making reckoning on racial injustice. And recovery refers to building back better than before. Now that the rescue plan has been signed and implementation is underway, the president will soon lay out his plan for how we can recover by investing in America, creating millions of new good-paying jobs, and combating the climate crisis. He outlined the broad principles of his Build Back Better economic recovery plan last year during the campaign, including investments in modern and clean infrastructure, mobilization of domestic manufacturing and innovative capacity, building caregiving infrastructure, and advancing programs for racial justice. Building Back Better means an updated social contract that treats American workers and working families as essential at all times, not just times of crisis, with higher wages, stronger benefits, and fair and safe workplaces. Building Back Better also means helping small businesses and entrepreneurs come out the other side of this crisis strong, while demanding more from corporate America. The president will have more to say on his Build Back Better economic recovery plan and other economic proposals moving forward. As a concluding point, our efforts to strengthen the economic recovery will not stop at the border. Our national security strategy, including our international economic policy, will be designed with working families in mind. This is not a hollow slogan, it's my job description. As Deputy National Security Advisor for International Economics, as well as Deputy Director for the National Economic Council, I sit at the intersection of international and domestic economic policymaking, and am responsible for helping both National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and National Economic Director Brian Deese to pursue international economic policies that help the American middle class. In practice, this means we will vigorously pursue macroeconomic policies at home and abroad that support sustained and inclusive growth in jobs and wages. We will protect our workers from unfair and abusive trading practices and lift up labor and environmental standards in our trading relationships. We will bolster supply chain resilience and revitalize innovative capacity in foundational technologies. We will advance national interests and core values with a principled and strategic use of our full economic toolkit. We will defend and strengthen core economic advantages that secure American prosperity, including through the power of our example on a cleaner form of capitalism. And we will commit to leading on this agenda in full partnership with like-minded allies, recognizing that they too are a vital part of our competitive strength and our nation's story. The American Rescue Plan represents an important step forward in this broader strategy of domestic renewal. And this is just the beginning. We have a lot more work to do. Thank you for your time and your attention.
Thank you very much, Daleep. It was really a pleasure to have you with us this morning. For those of you attending the conference, we have about a 20-minute break before the next session starts, and we hope you have a wonderful day at the 37th Annual NABE Policy Conference. Thank you, Daleep. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Constance.